If you work in a good restaurant, the chances are that wine is part of the experience, right? In this episode, we're going to talk about wine in a restaurant context, wine sales, and presenting wine to a customer. Also, as a bottle of wine can be the same value as the entire meal, it means that your earning potential is greatly enhanced if you learn how to sell a bottle of wine very well. Hi there, my name is Daniel Human, and I'm passionate about getting you to taste wine better, enjoy wine more, and love wine. In a previous episode, we focused on the interaction between a customer at a restaurant and a waiter or a sommelier. Now we look at this whole episode in further detail, but also from a different angle. Most restaurants cannot afford a full-time sommelier. This means that the waiter is the link between a customer and a bottle of wine or a wine experience. Maybe one of the waiters working in the restaurant knows more about wine than the others. Maybe one is passionate about wine. Maybe one person can take lead around wine. But there's absolutely no reason why that person can't be you. There's no reason why you can't interact with customers better and sell more wine. At the same time, I'm focused on my passion to get people to enjoy wine more, and a good bottle of wine will just work well for everyone. So let's quickly list the skills you need to know to sell more wine. The first thing I want to debunk is sales skills. Many people have a model of a snake oil salesman or fobbing something off to customers that they really don't want when you hear the word sales. Now, personally, I love sales. The reason I love sales is because I'm fulfilling a need. So it comes down to your mental model that you have around sales. If your mental model is that you are pushing something to somebody that they don't want or they don't desire because you want to make a buck, then your mental model is flawed, and your outcomes will many times reflect your mental model. This means the following. It means that if you are there and you see yourself as there to help a person and to help them navigate through a difficult interaction to get to a wine to go with a meal, you are seeing yourself as adding value. You're seeing yourself as providing a valuable service. And for that, customers have appreciation. They will give you a tip at the end of the evening if they had a good experience. Not a good experience with the wine, a good experience with you as a person. So when we talk about selling wine in a restaurant, there's a few skills that you need to focus on. You first need to understand that when you're working in a restaurant, there's a finite number of wines. So you don't need to become a wine master to add value to a customer. You just need to master the wines that's on the wine menu. Also, you need to master the food that's on the food menu. That's why you're there as a waiter, is to understand the specials, to understand the food, and also now to understand the wine that goes with that food. The customer is going to look at you to guide them through the process. They don't want an awkward situation. They don't want an uncomfortable situation. They want to be assisted. Well, in some cases, people want awkwardness. In some people are trying to present themselves as an expert, and that's an uncomfortable situation. And we're going to talk about how you deal with that situation. But in most cases, people just want to have a good meal, and they want to have good wine with the meal. I'm going to teach you an anagram to master food and wine pairing together. Because at the end of the day, you have to realize that if the food and the wine does not pair well, it's not the end of the enjoyment either. There's a hack that I'm going to teach you on how to enjoy your food and your wine if they don't pair. But if your food and your wine don't pair very well, it could take away from the total enjoyment of the customer and the total enjoyment of the meal. So if the customer comes along and they want to get an asparagus risotto and they want to get a very good Syrah to go with it, perhaps that's not the best choice. And you need to know it's not the best choice. You need to be able to guide the customer if they're going to go for an asparagus risotto towards something like a Sauvignon Blanc that goes very well with an asparagus risotto. A Syrah will go very well with some spicy food. some deep beef dishes. So it's up to you to guide them. Being a waiter is also learning. Being a waiter is mastering a craft, mastering an art. It's a good job. As a student, I waited from the age of 13 years old. And I always had money, and I always had luxuries that I could afford at a very early age. It's a good job to have, a waiter. But in any job, you need to master the job, and you need to learn more and more. Which means that learning more about wine and food will bolster your income, but also bolster your experience and bolster your career in maybe moving to better and better restaurants, or moving up in the rung in the restaurant that you are working in. It's up to you. You're the master of your own destiny. But it takes some learning, and there's no easy way to do learning. You've got YouTube, you've got Google that can assist you in some of the skills and some of the pairing difficulties. It's quite a scientific topic, but you don't need to be scientific about it. You need to be poncy about it. There's certain principles that you need to master. Let's dive in. Let's dive into the skills and some of the etiquette that you need to present wine to customers. Before I go on, if you like these videos and you find them valuable, please subscribe to the channel. Also, hit the like button if you like it. If you don't like it, hit the thumbs down button, give a comment, and we can interact. We'd really appreciate that. So, the first thing you need to understand is the simplicity of pairing food and wine. It comes down to the body of the food and the body of the wine. Now, what's the body of a wine? We very easily refer to some red wines as being full-bodied red wines. There's also some white wines that are full-bodied white wines. What does that mean? In many cases, it means a high percentage of alcohol. Full-bodied wine typically refers to a bottle of wine that's got more than 13.5% alcohol. But that's not all of it. There's the mouthfeel, the viscosity of the wine, the silkiness, the boldness of the flavors. All of that comes into the body of a wine. And the simple trick around food and wine is you want to have the same body in your wine as you have in the food. If you've got a light and fresh dish, a salad with a vinaigrette, you want to have something that is acidic and light. If you've got sole manure, you want to have something that is more full-bodied and that is buttery. Remember diacetyl? Your diacetyl you will find in the butter sauce and the fish, and you will find the wine. So they'll go well together. So wooded Chardonnay pairs very well. But let's look at the anagram. And the anagram is simple. It's base with 3 S's. BA-SSS. B is for body. As I said, the body of the food and the body of the wine should be similar. A is for acidity. Simple rule of thumb. Acidity, if you've got acidity in the food, like fish with a lemon sauce, or you've got a vinaigrette, you want to get some acidity in your wine as well. So go for a more colder climate, more acidic wine. The first S is sweet. Very simple rule of thumb. If your food is sweet, the wine should be sweeter. Which means that if you've got a dessert, you get a dessert wine which has got a high residual sugar. It's got sweetness. The second S is for spicy. If you've got a spicy dish, you want to have a spicy wine. So you get the peppery notes in a Syrah, you get the peppery notes and the tannic notes in a Cabernet. You want to get spiciness to go with spiciness. The last S is for salt. Now, when food is salty, be careful with tannic wines. Simple rule. Salty and tannic don't go together. However, salt is also an incredibly useful tip to give to a guest around getting your food and wine to pair. For instance, there's what is called the tomato test. When you take a cherry tomato, you cut it in half and you taste it with your wine. You typically find that it doesn't pair very well. Take a little bit of salt, put it onto the tomato, pop it into your mouth, and you'll find immediately pairs well with, for instance, a Cabernet or a Merlot. Why is that? Because the salt gives the umami, which gives you a good pairing with a wine? BASS, body, acidity, sweet, spicy, and salty. Body, acidity, sweet, spicy, salty. That's basically what you need to do. Now, a lot of people talk about cheese and wine, and they talk about pairing cheese and wine. Pairing cheese and wine is not as simple as it sounds. It's actually quite difficult. This is where you can do some research. You can look at tables of cheese and wine pairing that you can find via Google. There's many websites that have these resources. And just by the way, a lot of these resources are free. So it's up to you to access them. It's up to you how you use your time. The difference between a successful person and a less successful person is the attitude towards time. A successful person invests their time. An unsuccessful person normally spends their time. Investing your time in getting a new skill, investing your time in understanding how certain cheeses work better with certain wines is an investment, because you get return on that investment when you take that knowledge and you apply it to a conversation in the restaurant. Spending the time on playing a game or watching mindless YouTube videos about how to do better on YouTube videos is perhaps not going to get you to master the restaurant scene and to get you to get more earnings out of your job that you've got during the day. There's another area of pairing wine and food, which is red wine and chocolate pairing. Also fascinating. Go and Google it and go and build some skills around which chocolates go with which wine. Fascinating how they go together. Now when we talk about the entire wine service experience, there's certain tips that I'd like to share. You're presenting a wine to a customer. You want to sell that bottle of wine, so you're upselling the customer to a higher priced wine because it's better. Higher priced wine should typically be better, right? Not in all cases, but in most cases, yes. First step to do this is you need to present the wine. Simple rules. First rule is get a cloth. Present the wine with a cloth. Secondly, present the wine to the customer showing the label of the bottle, and on the label there should be the vintage. When you're dealing with non-vintage bottles such as certain sparkling wines, doesn't apply, but when you're dealing with vintage wines, you want the customer to make sure that what is on the menu is being offered to them. There's differences in the wines of different vintages, so you need the customer to engage with that specific vintage that you are selling. If it changes, for instance, the new wine has been delivered, the wine list hasn't been updated as yet, you have to then add a little bit of information to selling the wine. You need to tell them, this is now the 2017, the 2016 is finished, it's done. This is the 2017, the 2017 is different from 2016. It's got more raspberry notes, it's got more gooseberry notes, it's got more pronounced buttery notes. It was quite a dry year, so you'll find that the taste is more concentrated, and you engage and you tell the story. At the end of the day, it's unimportant whether the year is the same or not. The customer is fascinated by the story that you're telling. So, presenting the wine to the customer, present the label, present the year, and then you voice over. You tell them about the wine. The next step, opening the bottle of wine. Now, these days there's many alternatives to corks in wine. You get the screw cap, which is called the Stelvin cap. You get boxed wine, and obviously you're not going to serve boxed wine at the table. But when you're serving a wine per glass, or when you're serving it per bottle, most of the wines will have cork as a closure. Some of them will have screw caps or Stelvin caps. It's not that important. When you have a cork in a wine, there's a way to remove the cork. The first thing you need to do is you need to have one of these. This is called a waiter's corkscrew. Waiter's corkscrew. It's got a little knife. Very important, the little knife. So the first thing you want to do is you want to remove the enclosure. This is called the enclosure. It's covering the top of the bottle, the cork's in there. So using the knife, you need to, you see this ridge over here? You cut underneath the ridge. Cut underneath the ridge all the way around, and then tear off the top and exposes the cork. underneath that ridge. That's the way to do it. The next thing is you want to insert the corkscrew into the bottle. Now, when you observe this, the corkscrew is longer than the cork. It's longer than the cork. What is important is when you insert the corkscrew, you want to insert it that it does not penetrate the bottom of the cork. You don't want it to penetrate the bottom of the cork. This is etiquette, but also there's practical reasons. If you typically penetrate the cork at the bottom, you can find a small piece of cork dislodging and dropping into the wine. When you take out the cork, you will find that that little piece of cork stays in the bottle, and the first glass that you pour for tasting contains a bit of cork. And having some uneducated guests, a guest could very easily say to you, sorry, this wine is corked. Because for them a corked wine is having a bit of cork floating in the wine, and they can actually ask you to replace the bottle. Then you use the top of the, you use this to seat on the side of the glass. You will see, if I'm taking it like this, you will see that if you do it correctly, it will work very well. If you go too deep, you cannot fit this to the top of the bottle. So this is a very good way to train yourself in doing it. To train yourself, just take empty bottles, reinsert the corks and practice. As simple as that. So when you then use the lever action, you will find that the lever action very seamlessly pulls out the cork. You'll find the lever action pulls out the cork very easily. If you've done the lever action and the cork is still in there, you just take the cork and you just pull it out further. You will find that there's maybe this much of the cork still lodged in the bottle. It comes out very easily. That's doing it the right way. Now consider this. If the wine is quite old, well, firstly, if it's old and the restaurant that you work in sells old wine, they should typically have a somm. They should have a person that is really, really trained at decanting an old wine. Now, with an old wine, you can find that the cork disintegrates. Now, the cork disintegrates, it means that the cork is old, but also it means that you need to decant the wine. And decanting the wine, you can decant it through a cloth to catch the bits of cork, but also there's sediment in the bottle that you don't want to decant. So there's a whole art to decanting an old bottle of wine. But let's consider that in most cases, this will not apply to you. Now, once you've taken out the cork out of the bottle, it is your choice whether you want to present the cork to the guest or not. To present the cork, don't present it on your corkscrew. Take it off the corkscrew, present the cork to the customer. Some customers want to smell the cork. They want to sniff at the cork. So give them that honor. Most customers don't know why they're doing it. They basically saw it somewhere, or they think that's a way to judge the condition of the cork. But if a customer expects that, there's no harm in getting them to do that. Present them with the cork, it's a choice, stylistic choice. Then pour the wine. Simple rule, the person who ordered the bottle gets to taste the bottle. That's a simple rule. The person could ask somebody else to taste the bottle. It's their choice. They could say, sorry, Daniel is the expert here. I would like him to taste the wine. And then you alert it to the fact that you've got a potential wine ponce in your hands, and you present the wine to them. So how much do you pour? You pour a little bit of wine in the glass. A little bit of wine in the glass. Enough to get the aroma, enough to evaluate the wine, not to have a drink of the wine. When it comes to pouring the wine, it's another good habit to have a cloth that you hold the wine in when you pour the wine. Also maintaining the label on top. It's good etiquette. When the customer evaluates the wine, what are the potential scenarios that you can enter into? Well, scenario one, the guest would basically say yes. It's like a little rigmarole, as you see in this video snippet. The guest tastes the wine and they say yes. Potential number 2, the guest wants to impress, is the people around the table. Now this is a more tricky scenario, potentially dangerous scenario. You could have a guest that knows what they're talking about, and the wine could be corked, the wine could be off, the wine could not be fresh. But then you could have a person that's merely trying to impress others and that wants to go through a process of sending the wine back and getting another bottle because they believe in their mental model that's why you're doing what you're doing. That's not why you're evaluating the wine and why you're tasting the wine. And unfortunately, part of this is educational. Etiquette dictates that if a person says that the wine is corked, if they say no to the wine, a somm is called, the owner is called, and they get a moment to evaluate the wine. The owner could decide that it's not worth the fuss to get into a fight with the customer. The wine could be fine and the owner could decide to keep the wine for per glass sales. It's fine. It depends on the wine and depends on the price of the wine at the end of the day. But there's quite a bit of etiquette that dictates this process. The first part of etiquette is that if a wine fault is reported, it should be checked by a skilled person. That skilled person could be you. So if the customer says the wine is faulty, you could take the glass and you could evaluate the wine as well, doing the swirl, doing the sniff. You don't need to taste it. Your nose will tell you everything that you need to know. Remember, cork taint is a very pronounced wine fault. It smells like wet newspapers, it smells like wet dog, it smells like a dank basement, and there's an absolute absence of any fruit flavors. Corked wine smells prominently bad. However, if a guest at that moment decides, well, they actually don't want a red, they want a white, because fancy takes them, it's not really acceptable for the guest to send for another bottle of wine. Typically, it's to evaluate the wine that they've chosen, which means that if the wine is off, it gets replaced with a similar wine. If that's the last bottle, you could present them with a different wine. However, if they have changed their mind and they say, well, they taste the wine and they say, well, no, this is not going to work very well. I'm not going to go for this Pinot Noir. Then some restaurants would actually put that on the bill, irrespective of them drinking it or not. Some restaurants will give it as a takeaway bottle in a bag, corked again. Put the cork back, and you broke it, you bought it. Principle. Once again, it comes to a choice on whether you want to get into a fight with the customer or not. The episode is dictated by certain etiquette. Let's now say that everything went well. The guest approves the wine. What now? Etiquette dictates that you pour the wine in a certain way. The person who tasted the wine is the beginning point, and clockwise from the person who tasted the wine, you will fill the glasses, and then you will fill the glass of the person who tasted. Now, once again, you fill it to a specific level. You don't fill the entire glass. You fill it to normally the bulb of the tulip-shaped glass. That's where you fill the glass to. You go clockwise. Another accepted way of doing it is where the ladies clockwise get served first, then the men clockwise, and the person who tasted gets served last. Another accepted norm is where, if it's a celebration, let's say it's a graduation or a birthday, and it's been identified as such, the person who gets celebrated gets served first. That's another accepted norm. So they get served, and that comes to the last skill. The last skill is getting resales, getting more sales. And the resales and more sales comes down to the following. As soon as a person's glass becomes empty, you come with your cloth, you fill the glass for them. You ask them, can you fill the glass for them? Be careful, some people drink more than others, and I won't personally do it twice for one person and not for the rest of the table. I would leave it for a little while. You refill the glass, and the reason you're doing it is because you want to be close to the table, close to the bottle, and as the bottle empties, you present another bottle to them. Maybe a dessert wine, maybe a different wine, maybe a wine of the same varietal or the same bottle. And that's basically it. Simple, not too complex, and you can master it. You can earn a lot more.
Darling, don't snort it, just drink it, sweetie. Oh! Fabulous. Fantastique. Now, this one, we've tried this one. I like this one. Is this one? This is the one, Pat. This one, this is the one, sweetie. This one here. We tried this. Yes. Have we tried this one? Have we tried this one? What is this one? We haven't tried this one, I don't think, sweetie. We tried this one. No, this is the one. This is the one. That's the one we like. This is the one we like. This is the one we didn't want. That one, the empty one. We didn't want this one. But this is the one. This is the one. This is the one we wanted. This one we didn't want. That is the one that we're. Right now, this was one, and this was one, and this was one. We haven't had that. And that box. We're having the box as well. Someone's taking the steering wheel!